Hi everybody, thank you so much for coming to the GTBank Fashion Weekend 2018. I'm looking forward to being your moderator for the day. I'm hoping we have an amazing class, so let's get right into it. So the facilitator for the day is someone who's worked in the Caring Group, he's worked for Gap Inc., and currently he's the Dean of Fashion at Parsons Fashion School. Please give a warm welcome to Dean Burak Cakmak. Thank you so much for being here today. Lovely to have you. So the topic of discussion for the day is building a fashion ecosystem. Building a fashion ecosystem. Can you elaborate to us what you kind of were thinking around when you were thinking about that topic? What were you hinting at? What were you trying to talk about?
Sure. First and foremost, I wanted to say good afternoon, and I'm very happy to be here. First time in Lagos. Very nice to meet all of you. Already had an amazing experience in the past 24 hours, so looking forward to what's to come today, and also the shows as well. Also interested in your points of view after we have the conversations. So I really wanted to delve into the topic from an ecosystem perspective because I work with a lot of designers. And we graduate hundreds and hundreds of designers every year out of School of Fashion at Parsons. And I see the importance of them being part of the larger network and what enables them to be successful. So I wanted to take this opportunity to get into that conversation to say, what does it take to be a designer, but also how do you succeed in the industry?
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. You studied international relations like myself. And now you're the Dean of Fashion at Parsons School of Design, which is one of the top fashion schools in the world. Everyone who's into fashion or anyone who's in fashion knows Parsons. How did you go from international relations into fashion?
So I think my journey is a very good example that there's no linear path to getting into any industry, but especially even fashion. So if you started with a passion in being a designer and you succeeded in it, that's great. But there are many other pathways into getting into the industry as well. So I am a good example of that. Studying international relations, my heart was being a diplomat for the country that I was born in, which is Turkey. And then it was a moment where I decided to go get an MBA in US. And it just kind of opened the door for me to think about what I can do for the for-profit and the non-profit sector at the same time. And I was looking for an opportunity to bring those two worlds together.
Okay. So you started off at Gap Inc. Yes. Went on to Caring Group, which houses Gucci, Bottega Veneta, and other luxury brands. Yeah. You then went into the luxury jewelry market before you went on to being, the Dean of Parsons. Yeah. How did you kind of move from each group to the next? How did you make that? How did you make those decisions? Why those groups?
Absolutely.
And what exactly were you doing there?
Yeah. I mean, getting into Gap Inc. was really about working through the supply chain and learning about how to improve the working conditions first and foremost in their global network. What impressed me the most was to see the scale. At that time, Gap Inc. was the largest specialty retailer in the world. They were sourcing out of 50 countries, 4,000 factories. The supply chain had a 50% turnover annually. So being in my early 20s going into factories, I was seeing orders that were over 1 million per SKU. So you can imagine the scale you're dealing with. And then when you're a small business, it's such a different world. So in that complexity, we were looking at how to make sure we set standards across the world that's aligned with the values of the brand. So with that approach, I grew within the organization, worked on tying labor standards into business strategy and developing new methodologies to tie it all the way to the branding. That opened the door for me to take this approach and replicate it in other companies. So when I moved to London, I have been approached by a Gucci group at that time, which is today is called Kering. And they were really interested in adopting new strategies around sustainability, community engagement across their luxury brands. So I was their first hire on the luxury side. And it was an opportunity for me to work with across the board, from the largest luxury brands such as Gucci all the way to the small but very well-known brands such as Alexander McQueen, Yves Saint Laurent, as well as Balenciaga, to look at what is appropriate for them to embed into their brand image, as well as how they operate to differentiate across the market. In some ways, those efforts took Kering to where it is today. If you look at it, they're now known as the leader in luxury for their sustainability efforts. And briefly from that point on, I evolved into other segments because I like taking a challenge, and that's why I have this unlinear path. I was able to kind of get in touch with the Swarovski group, which also wanted to start their journey in building a corporate structure across all of their business operations, to look at how to embed sustainability in everything they do. So that allowed me to build a team across the world, really look at what does it mean to be a sustainable jewelry brand, how do we position the company with their values to differentiate from rest of the companies that they operate with. All of that experience gave me incredible insights into what does it mean to work across the whole value chain of any fashion jewelry industry business, and look at what are the elements that can be done to improve business operations, find ways of engaging with communities, and really also tie it all the way to the brand to differentiate in the market, to stand among your competitors as a leader for your consumer. And I wanted to take all of that knowledge into education, and that's how Parsons conversation started. So when they reached out to me, I was also surprised because my experience is deeply rooted into the industry itself. I worked across every aspect of the industry, and I was also teaching part-time in universities because personally I'm passionate about it. But in some ways, I never thought of taking over the role of a dean in a school. And what has been an impressive journey for me as well is recognizing that all of my experience showed me the designer plays a key role in the industry. Not only for the small brands, but also for the large brands. And what I've seen in the past, because I worked with a lot of fashion schools when I was in the industry, is that designers are normally trained to just focus on creating the most incredible product and really push their creativity in telling a story around the product itself. But they're not always linked to the rest of the value chain or part of the story or the branding of the company they work for. And I also realized that unless we get to the designers early enough in their journey, we are not able to shape their minds to think differently about the industry and give them the tools to bring change to the problems that we are experiencing in the industry today. So being in Parsons allowed me to work with young minds and young talent that's going to be the big names of the future, that's going to build their own companies, or they're going to take creative director roles, to be able to engage in topics that's not just about how to create a beautiful product, but also understand their role in society and how they can change the industry within. So that allowed me to take the job through my interviews, but also allow me to shape the curriculum to think differently about the future of design.
Okay, interesting. So as a dean at Parsons, how does the school differentiate itself from its counterparts? There's so many fashion schools to go to, so many to sift through. How does Parsons stay at the top? You spoke about, when we had an earlier conversation, you spoke about, revamping the curriculum and trying to do things differently to keep up with, the changing trends in fashion. Can you speak a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as soon as I started, I recognized that there are especially 3 key topics that is impacting the industry, and also designers can play a role in that. So first one is sustainability. It's a topic that I engage in deeply in the industry, and I've seen it evolve for the past decade exponentially. Today, any large international brand you talk to is talking about what does it mean to be a sustainable brand and what actions they're taking to show their consumers how they are being responsible and recognizing their impact both on climate change as well as on society. So sustainability was a key thing I wanted to embed into the curriculum. The second one was technology. The role of technology is so significant today. Technology made what fashion industry is today for the past 100 years. After industrialization starting in UK, the speed of how we can create textiles, but also how we can create garments, changed very quickly. That allowed a lot of new businesses to come up and really shape up the industry in the way we know it today. So the industry is much larger than anybody could have ever imagined. So we need to look at what technology means in that creation process, but also in the way we retail and how we engage directly with the consumer. So I was very interested in embedding technology into curriculum as well. And then the third topic was the role of designer in society. So as I was mentioning, I always felt like designers were encouraged to live in their own creative world. In some ways, it was this hidden secret that the creative would work behind closed doors and come up with the most amazing creations and then introduce it to the world through a fashion show. We don't want to lose that magic. That magic is critical. But in that journey, we also want to recognize that beyond that magical creation, there is an inspiration that's happening for the designer with what's happening around them. In some ways, working with a lot of young designers, I already see that most of their inspiration comes from their families, their communities, the places they live, the people that they interact with. So I wanted to encourage also how can a designer play a bigger role in society, be much more intentional about the influence they're getting from society itself, and then be openly talking about it, and in some ways taking a much more of an activist voice. And I think we are already seeing this as a trend in many places around the world, not just in Europe and US, where a lot of the designers are trying to bring their voice and taking a stance on critical issues for them, and really using their creativity, but also their influence to connect back to the societal issues. So those were the three key topics that I try to embed, but to enable that, we did quite a lot of steps in the curriculum. So one of the way we differentiated is looking across the board for all these things that I mentioned and embedding it into each course we teach in a practical manner. So I don't believe in necessarily creating a silo for any single topic. And it should be accessible knowledge to all designers, and then you choose from a menu that's available to you how you want to engage in the conversation through use of new technologies, through addressing sustainability, through looking at how do you bring your voice connected to your community, to the runway, also to your audience and to the customer buying your products. So we did a full review of our curriculum to embed that. But more importantly, I recognize that it's becoming much, much, much easier to create a collection. The speed of things in the industry is very different. Today, many people who didn't study design, or that's not a designer per se, I don't want to also say that you have to study design to become a designer, but there are a lot of people that are not creative that are going into the fashion industry because they recognize it's easy to make money from it because it's a big industry. So today is the day we need to differentiate designers all around the world to stand apart from people getting into it just for the purpose of business. So it meant that we need to give them new tools to think about design and open the door to be more experimental and bring innovation. In the past, before I joined, we used to incentivize our designers through awards that we give them at the end of their graduation. And we had two categories, menswear and womenswear. To me, that's a very old way of thinking about design. Yes, in retail, we are selling still menswear and womenswear, but it doesn't mean that fashion has expanded and diversified. First and foremost, I should also maybe briefly talk about our profile as a school. We graduate around 400 designers every year across several degrees, associate, bachelor, and masters. And what is quite interesting is we have around 110 countries represented. So we have Nigerians, we have Senegalese, we have Chinese, we have Koreans, we have people from all over the world. And what amazed me is that when you take them out of their local context and put them in that mix, they're creating a global village. And within that global village, there's an incredible diversity. Even a topic like gender becomes a key issue. And we recognize that even in our school, we have different gender identities that everybody wants to represent themselves. So I had a challenge saying that we are rewarding people based on menswear and womenswear. So we wanted to turn that around and incentivize how do we push innovation. So we introduced 4 new categories. So I encourage all of you to also look on our website to understand the people that are winning these awards, to give a sense of the diversity that we are getting out of the designers. So these categories are creative systems, social innovation, fashion and textile, future textiles, and fashion and technology. So they are all intended to push for innovation regardless of the type of product you're creating. And also we slightly change and specialize in new pathways within our fashion design system, recognizing that we want to encourage more diversity and deeper research into different topics. So we still care about collection, and it's the area where a lot of the designers come to us for. So we really support that. But we also introduced a new category called fashion product. And we want to call it product, not just accessory, because I know that as a designer, you're able to do much more than just a bag or a leather good. And you can design any product you want. And what amazed me is that we had some incredible outcomes. We have fashion designers that are creating what they call it product, but it's basically an online retail experience. That's the future of retail from a designer's perspective, as their thesis project. And then the last 2 pathways that we created, one of them is called materiality. It's really going in deeper into the material itself. When we talk about sustainability, there's a lot of focus on what is the material that I'm using, where does it come from, is it sustainable, who created it, and what's its impact on the environment. So we have a lot of designers at the moment in US interested in future materials. So they're interested in using technology and biology to reinvent what the future of materials can be for fashion. So there's a big range. We are seeing revival of art and craft. There's definitely an interest in handloom and weaving. And if there is those opportunities to engage with those communities here, I encourage everybody to innovate with all of the local artisans, because we don't want that to disappear in the world. And I truly believe that's going to be the future of luxury, which is handmade, limited edition, high quality, and requires thousands of hours to make, but all the way to very high-tech ways of production for materials. So for example, we invested on a lot of new equipment. We have shimeseki machines, which are the 3D knitting machines. So today a designer can fully design a knitwear on a computer, and on the push of a button it gets printed on a whole garment shima machine without a human touch. So they're also learning how to do handcraft from thousands of hours of work, everything is hand touched, to something that's digitally created and produced out of a machine. At the same time, there's a big interest in biomaterials. So we are now entering into all the biodesign challenges around the world. So there's a lot of interest in biotech, using things like kombucha, as well as many different materials that are now being experimented. So if you research around future of biomaterials, you'll see a lot of experimentation happening. And there's a lot of interest to scale this up for the industry. At the moment it's small, but that's where the future is headed. And then finally, our last pathway is fashion systems. This is something that I'm personally passionate about, because having been in the industry around fashion, sustainability and fashion, I recognize the #1 problem for large business is around their business model. So if you're a small business, or if you're a designer, you're just starting to build your own organization, it's important to base it on a different process, recognizing your impact, and really change the system itself. With that in mind, we created this pathway called Fashion Systems, where we are really going deeper into the process and questioning each designer to look at a full system, not just the product that they're creating, so that they're ultimately graduating with a whole business concept. And it doesn't mean that it has to be always a for-profit business, Sometimes it's an activist movement. Sometimes it's a different way of community engagement. Sometimes it's a new way of thinking about a product that's not a fashion product, and really trying to change that system using their fashion design skills. Because fashion is so emotional and so connected, I see big opportunity to use fashion to also have influence in many different sectors. So maybe I can give an example out of fashion system as well. So recently we had 2 of our graduates, their business is called CAIR Collective, C-A-I-R. So if you Google that, you will see their work as well. So they wanted to look at a system around people with a certain type of disability. They had a client who had ALS, which is a disability where the individual is not able to use their arm at all. So this individual, 26 years old, lives alone. She's not able to even use her arms to dress herself, but she wants to be independent. So they came up with a whole fashion system for her to dress herself every day in her own house. They did in-depth research working with her and created beautiful garments where she can easily put on and off. And they came up with new techniques that's not necessarily always using the fashion methodology, but really taking it from other areas. So all the way to one of the most extreme examples is that they created a skeleton structure that is connected to an electric pump. So the client is able to push the pump with her feet, which then inflates, rests the dress on her, and then it deflates. So she doesn't even have to use her arms. So it's a very niche example, but it was a great challenge for us to say that if you're working in this kind of an environment, how do you take elements out of this and apply to the wider world? So with them, we sat down and said, let's look at what did you use as a way of thinking around design. And in some ways, we are calling that universal design principles. And there were elements around that design system that she created that can be adapted to many different uses. So we are taking those elements, for example, how to put on a trouser without using your hands. This can be adapted by any one of us in the room, as well as looking at clothes that doesn't require any sizes. So it's one size fits all. So we are now taking these and they're creating it as a new way of creating their fashion brand, which is going to be based on universal design principles. So in some ways, it gives a taste of the range of things that we're doing, how we opened up our curriculum.
Interesting. So I really want to talk to you. I know you're very into sustainability. You worked for a non-profit in Europe, focusing on sustainability in luxury fashion. And so there's this sustainability, environmental impact. This is something that I know you feel strongly about. So how you have brands like Burberry, burning millions of dollars each year in goods to prevent counterfeits being made and pushing their prices down, moving them from luxury to what kind of conversations are you starting around that?
And I want to expand it onto the full industry, so we're not picking on necessarily one brand, but absolutely they were in the news about this. It was absolutely getting a lot of attention, rightly so. And one of the key issues in the industry and why sustainability is becoming a big topic is the environmental impact of the business. So some of it is in the supply chain and how they produce, and chemicals and dyes that are used. But more and more, the big attention is around the waste generated out of the fashion industry. So luxury brands have a different approach than the mass market. The big issue with mass market is most of the time they produce too many quantities because you don't want to lose any of the sale. So when you produce so much, you put things in sale, and what doesn't sell on sale has to be disposed of. That goes into different parts of the world, or it goes into landfill. Luxury brands obviously don't want their products to be distributed in this way to diminish their brand value. So they take other measures, such as the one you're mentioning. So this is a very good example of the challenge of the business model, both for the mass market and the luxury. So how do we find a place where we are meeting the customer demand without creating too many products, so we don't have to burn it or we don't have to get rid of it? And that there's no direct answer to it, but there's a lot of initiatives that are now taking place to look at how do we create either a circular system where, especially for the mass market, there's a lot of interest in taking and converting the existing fabrics into yarn, back into new fabric, as a circular way of reusing it so it doesn't go to landfill. And for luxury, it's about optimization of their products so that they don't have to necessarily dispose of it. I don't expect there will be an immediate solution to it, and I cannot imagine necessarily this product either going on sale or being distributed to be used by other brands. So the only solution will be looking at matching the need to the number of units that are produced. And what's interesting is outside of the existing fashion brands, there's quite a lot of interest in kind of tackling this issue. So I see a big trend around extreme customization. So there's a lot of opportunity for individualizing the production through use of technologies. What's interesting is with access to social media, internet, but also being able to have online design tools, there are enough brands out there now experimenting, giving access to an end user to actually make customizations on a product and wait for the product to arrive with their own unique signature on it. This is actually a brilliant business model because it means that you don't have to produce until you get the order. You get prepay, and then you're able to create and ship it without the risk of necessarily disposing it later on. So I think it's important for all brands to look at how to use technology and this desire for customization as a way of tackling this problem that we talked about, but also as a better business practice. Because ultimately, it's better for your cash flow in the business if you're able to get the pre-orders. And I'm excited to see how many more people are now ordering online. Now we just have to get a new habit for individuals to be able to wait maybe 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 1 month. If it's a unique enough product, people are excited about it, they will wait for it to come to them. Yeah. So that will change the whole dynamic, and it's going to have also sustainability benefits throughout that journey.
But that's also very rare, having people waiting to get their products in 2 weeks or a month, because the way that the fashion industry works right now, people want things right now, see now, buy now, which is why you have a lot of runway shows, having those shows where you buy straight off the runway. So how is that going to work with the customization? You have people, you have the Zara's, you have the H&M, they see on the runway, they produce in a week, in 2 weeks, they're out, and no one's waiting for the luxury brands to produce that same piece in 9 months. Yeah. So how would that work?
Well, some of the optimization is to speed up that production process, and with localization this is possible. So I was just talking to a new manufacturing business that's being built in New York. What's interesting is they're basically a B2B solution. They're interested in working with small designers and absolutely offer this kind of a service so that they are able to, using especially the knitting technology I was mentioning, there's no human touch. And as an individual designer, let's say you're based in New York, you're able to get an order and immediately send that order to this manufacturing facility just outside of the city that can get that knitted through the machine in a day or two and ship it. So I think there will be appetite to wait for that long as it's a unique product that that meets your design sensibility. When it comes to fast fashion, that's a different story. So they're trying to address it in a different way. So if you look at H&M, for example, now they offer services for bring back items. They give you also a discount to be able to shop more. So what they're proposing is that they want to sell more, but they want to create a circular process where they don't want you to dispose the clothes. They want to collect them and find ways of recycling. I think what we need to do as end consumers, because we may be people in the industry, but we are also buying clothes, we need to ask questions to large brands as well, how they are taking responsibility. So when I see a company that's encouraging recyclability of a product, I acknowledge that, but I also want to see how that's being managed. So if it's distributed around the world for resale, that's one thing, but not everything necessarily always sold and goes to landfill. So if they are investing, like in the case of H&M, for a solution where they can turn the product into a new yarn that goes into a new product and create a full closed loop, then it's a whole new proposition that may actually work for fast fashion. The differentiation is most of the people that are graduating, especially out of Parsons, are desiring to create different kind of design brands. and they want to keep it small. They want to create a unique product. They want to stand out with their designs first and foremost. So in their case, it's going to be around the emotional connection they create, and then really find a way to stand apart from everybody else. And one way to do that is to make sure that your design is original, number one. You're not copying anybody. And that's one of the challenges that we see in the industry with a lot of young designers graduating. Every year, I see quite a lot of their designs inspiring even the large brands.
Yeah.
Because everything is in social media, they are challenged all the time to protect their own IP. But at the same time, how do you do it beyond just the product? You need to build an identity around who you are as a designer so that people are not coming to you for just the product. They really believe in your brand, they are part of your community, and they want to continue to follow you and support you. And then there is that ongoing loyalty that you have created that's going to differentiate you from the larger brands.
Okay, quickly moving on. I want to discuss evolving global trends in fashion. We have the fast fashion brands, the Zara's, the H&M's, as I said before, and then you have the luxury brands trying to keep up with them in terms of production time, as we said. Where is that going to lead fashion in the near future? How are they going to keep up with that? Because you're moving from the traditional setting of about 2 collections a year. You have the spring, summer, you have the autumn, winter, and now you have the resort, you have the cruise, you have the, and they're trying to keep up with this insatiable need for fashion all the time, all year round. How are the luxury brands how are they going to maintain this in the future? Because you have creative designers having nervous breakdowns, having to be on all throughout the year. What's that going to do in fashion in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the industry is oversaturated with number of activations that are happening because it's all about creating hype and excitement at the moment. Even what design has evolved. If you look at luxury brands, they used to build their reputation to be luxury based on the materials that they're using, the exclusivity of the product. Now it's all about being design-led, creating that interest and hype, especially with the young generation, especially connecting with the celebrity and the social media influencer crowd. Also, the fact that we don't necessarily have 2 collections a year, but with leadership of Zara turning the production and introduction of products into market nearly every other week, now we are seeing even luxury brands introducing products every month into the market. So I don't think we need to get to a place where there's a new product in the store every day. I don't think everybody wants to go and see what's in the store every day. So we are hitting that saturation point. It's going to push the brands to think differently. At the same time, we are also seeing a lot of non-traditional players getting into the space. So if you look at what's happening with the retail segment, the big thing that a lot of the fashion brands are paying attention to are companies like Amazon, Alibaba, JD.com, that are not necessarily fashion brands, but they are engaging in different ways. Some of them have their private label, some of them are working with designers to give them access, but they are shaping the industry because of the fact that they control logistics platform, sales platform, and there are large populations now directly buying out of these platforms. So the way a brand is engaging with the consumer is also changing. It's becoming very difficult as a brand for you to bring foot traffic into your store, number one. Also, even to your website online, because we are looking at comparable shopping, and there are a lot of retail solutions that allow you to look for different price points and different products on non-traditional retail websites. So that is impacting how the brands are behaving. That's why it's becoming more critical for a designer to talk about not just the product, but who they are and control even their distribution. So the future for big brands is there's no way but to engage with all of the players, because otherwise you cannot keep your size. But if you're a small brand, the opportunity is to control where you sell and how you engage. So I would recommend that before you go onto a platform like Amazon, really look at how do you find a place that allows you to grow sustainably without necessarily losing control of your values as a brand, allow you to control your cash flow so that you can look at the price points, who you're compared to, and then find ways of really engaging your consumer through different channels, especially tapping into non-traditional influencers and social media. And some fashion brands are already doing that. So what impressed me is, especially when you look at the performance sector and brands like Adidas and Nike, they are actually finding micro-influencers that are very knowledgeable about specific topics, but not a lot of people know about them, and have them start writing and blogging about them on their own platforms. And it really create a cult following around the individual product that's being introduced. The other thing that is impressing me is these brands are recognizing the importance of collaboration. So that's another way of really staying relevant. So big brands are tapping into young generation to do collaborations, to generate excitement, and get attention from Generation Z from all over the world.
Okay, sadly we're running out of time, so I'm just going to keep it to one more question before we go into the quick Q&A session. So what advice would you have? I'm sure there are lots of young people here, or people who want to go into fashion. What advice would you have for a young Nigerian trying to start out in fashion, trying to go to school or not go to school, just trying to get their foot in the door and just start something?
Yeah, in some ways, hopefully all the conversation help also touch on some of these points. What's important is that it's not, you should not be thinking about just becoming a fashion designer. You have to know also everything that's around you and use that network to your advantage. One beauty of being in a place like New York is that you have a cluster of creative people that are constantly interacting with each other. So I want to thank GTBank also for creating even this opportunity to bring people together. And there has to be more of these kind of activations where the creatives, yeah. And we really need opportunities for even more creative sharing to happen in places where there is access to making facilities and studios and workshops, so that you're engaging in a practical manner, testing ideas without the fear of doing something wrong. You should never think about failing, because that's the only way you're going to learn. And what is impressing me the most in many places around the world now, I'm seeing these hubs and centers that are being created where creative people can come together with a lot of making equipment available in this space and just play, come up with ideas without the fear of necessarily creating something to sell. And you learn from each other. So that making space is critical, but beyond that, you also need to create a space where you can engage with the social media influencers, as well as stylists and makeup artists and everybody that's part of that network, to work together and really create opportunities to show your work and really get out there to tell that Nigeria has something to offer to the world. And first and foremost, don't shy away from your local identity. What has been more impressive for me to see in the past couple years is that everybody is going back to their roots, and they are really playing up where they come from. Yeah. Be from Africa, be from Asia, be from Latin America. Use that as your way of differentiating, rather than trying to pretend or create an image that you're no different than somebody else. Your difference makes you unique and interesting, and that's what's going to get the attention the most. So please be true to yourself and highlight that as a way of standing apart from everybody else.
Okay. Thank you so much. We're going to go to a very, very quick round of questions. Also, I should probably add that we have makeup giveaways, so ask good questions.
Okay. My name is DJ Mortal. You can call me DJ Mortal. I have two questions. My first question is, you talked about a company in New York that want to work with small designers. Please, what's the name of this company? And do they want to work with everybody worldwide or just in New York there? Then the second one I want to ask is, can we have your business card, please? Yeah.
Absolutely. Actually, there are a few places where this kind of activity is happening. So one thing that is amazing is this space called Brooklyn Farm, and it's actually run by Adidas. It's open to a lot of creatives to come and play. So you should definitely look at what they're doing. And there's also a lot of incubators. One of them we are actually running. It's called XRC Labs. If you look at their website, you'll see that it's open to any fashion business to apply to go through an incubation process. And you're being trained for 14 weeks on how to create a global business. And outside of it, you do a pitch session similar to Shark Tank. We bring a lot of investors into the space. And if people like your idea and if you're unique enough, you also get investment to grow your business itself. So I encourage anybody in the room to apply. You don't have to be a fashion design graduate from any school. Anybody with a fashion design idea and a brand that exists can apply to it.
Awesome. Next question, please.
Hi, my name is Ife Bakari. I run a streetwear brand here called XI. I'm curious to hear, what do you think about streetwear now? You see Off-White, you see Supreme getting a lot of hype. What's your thoughts on it being sustainable, long-term? And then if you can add, what do you think about African designers going global? We always hear Zara, H&M. Why are there no African equivalents?
Yeah.
Great
In the short term, great opportunity. It will continue to be relevant, especially in Asia and US. So regardless of where you're coming from, you can be based here, and I think you can take an amazing twist on what streetwear can mean with that African element in it. And you should definitely try to highlight it both in US as well as across Asia, primarily China, because there's a huge demand. And in the long term, it will evolve, but it's not going to disappear because ultimately Generation Z that cares about this. And I would recommend even looking, one of our graduates is doing some interesting collaborations on this. I don't know if you heard of Jankoi, Gahnkoy. She has been really tapping into the streetwear identity mixed with where she comes from. She's originally Siberian. And this is what I was saying in tapping into your identity, playing that Siberian element mixed with all the other cultures and streetwear. She's now doing a collaboration with Puma. They're launching a commercial line together, and she just graduated 2 years ago.
Awesome. Two more very quick questions, please.
Thank you so much for your session, and I want to say thank you to GTBank for this opportunity. My question is, I want to know your major do's and don'ts to maintain sustainability, especially in a new startup business. Yeah, thank you.
For small business, being sustainable is different than a big one. So I would say that it's about looking at basically how you engage with your community because you're doing at small scale. People want to hear your story about who worked on the product, and most of the time you're doing it out of an atelier. So it's important to tell that story. One, where do you source your materials? How is it produced? As well as how are you telling the story of the people that are working on it? And then really highlight that there is artisans that are involved in some ways. A lot of brands are trying to tell that story, and you can do it genuinely because you're based here and working with the local community. And I would definitely try to bring your local Nigerian elements into it, and even try to bring in some of the handcraft so that the story is more impactful, and then make sure that this is all documented online in that detailed way, and show the name and the faces of everybody touched on that product, and make people proud of buying it so that they not only buy because it's beautiful, but they also know everybody involved in that journey.
Due to time constraints, I'm so sorry we can't take any more questions. But can we please give a resounding round of applause for Burak, Cakmak? We have lots of makeup to give away, so can we stand up and give him a really, really, really resounding round of applause? Thank you so much for attending the class. Welcome again to the GTBank Fashion Weekend 2018. I'm your moderator, Zembegi Wasage, your facilitator, Burak Cakmak. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and great seeing you.